Greetings. My name is Matthew Rozsa, and this is episode 1 of my new series, Back Seat Socialism. In this series, we discuss issues in politics, culture, science, and more, all of which, in my opinion, heavily involve capitalism. As a result, we are going to deconstruct capitalism in our society today through the lens of these various issues. To start, I'm going to begin with a movie that I love, that I believe, despite receiving great critical reviews, is still underrated, and which tragically, it seems, is not going to receive a direct follow-up. I am speaking to the director of that movie, Kevin Greutert, my good friend, and the two screenwriters who also penned Saws 8 and 9, Pete Goldfinger and Josh Stolberg. Greutert, I should add, directed Saws 6 and 7 as well. Kevin, Josh, Pete, it is great to have you here, and it is great to talk about Saw X.
Good to see you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks.
Thanks for having us.
Fun.
I'm going to start with what I consider to be the most compelling political theme in the movie. Kramer, or Jigsaw as he is known to audiences, obviously has an anti-establishment philosophy. As a result of that philosophy, he is very much inclined to believe Dr. Cecilia Peterson, the villain, when she scams him about her supposed cancer cure. I compare that to a lot of Americans today who legitimately question establishments, especially the medical establishment, but at the same time sometimes follow a Pied Piper into drowning rather than legitimate sources of information. So my question for you, my opening question is, to what extent does your movie intentionally address those themes, and how do you feel they're still relevant today?
You want to start, Josh?
Yeah, sure. I think that that Saw X definitely speaks to a truth that a lot of Americans now know kind of firsthand, that our healthcare system is built first and foremost not to heal people, but to make money. And it's no different in our film. John is targeted by this fraudster, offering a miracle cure. And John buys it because he's vulnerable and he's desperate. He's willing to do anything he can to live like we all want to live. And what happens is that when, the system leaves people to fend for themselves, you realize that this kind of life-saving treatment is, where we all believe it should be a right, it becomes more of a commodity. And John is because he already has a mindset that's kind of off of what we typically believe. Like, he's willing to hurt people to make them, find their way. He too is he's more easily scammed because of it. I guess that's the beginning. Does anybody want to add to that?
Yeah, I would say, as you recall, because the three of us, we spent a lot of time with Tobin Bell, the actor who plays Jigsaw, talking about the script and getting his input in particular. And Tobin was very concerned that that John Kramer would seem like a fool for falling for this scam. And Josh and Pete, they wrote a whole lot of technical medical jargon for Cecilia to sort of gird this appearance of expertise. Not all of which is even in the movie, although what's in there and what's gone is great. She has this very beautiful face, this trustworthy mien, and she hired Gabriella to sort of usher John Kramer into her facility. So all these things, I think, really helped us believe that John Kramer is right by falling for this scam. But at the end of the day, I think he does fall victim to his kind of maverick skepticism about science and healthcare. And we added some lines, or maybe they were already there, early on, like when we see Cecilia Peterson, when John Kramer's first doing his internet search, we see her talking about the big drug companies don't want cancer to be cured because that's how they make all their money. And we see John going, and they get that he's one of these kind of guys that probably would not have gotten his COVID vax if he had lived to be, into 2021. So yeah, I think he falls a little bit victim of his own skepticism about science.
Well, he's willing to look in a different direction, because that's his entire philosophy, is to go off-roading when it comes to how to deal with your problems. And when he's living in our world, he's living in our country, and when our own institutions fail us because they are putting profit over healthcare, he needs to look someplace else. And that's why he goes and looks to Mexico. That was like the whole reason that we were using Mexico for this, for this journey for him.
I'm glad you brought up Mexico, because that brings me to how Saw X does a fantastic job of capturing Mexican culture. It is a movie that goes into the details of Mayan mythology and tries to intertwine them with the Saw mythology. It has all of this respect for Mexico in terms of the visuals, in terms of the characterizations. I feel in our political era that is a somewhat bold choice. Mexico is often vilified in movies. How do you feel that people can respectfully represent Mexico in cinema?
I mean, I think it's. Sorry, go ahead.
No. You.
I mean, I think it's about making it about the individuals and not about. We're not making a movie about Mexico. We're making a movie about the United States. We're making a movie about the individuals, just the human component. If for us, or for me at least, Mexico in Saw X isn't just a backdrop. It's an essential part of this story that we're telling. Obviously we're aware that, that especially now in the days that we're living in now, Mexico is vilified, and some of our leaders are creating these stereotypes and kind of using it to shorthand danger. So it wasn't a mistake that we were kind of playing into that just a little bit. But we also it was really important to us to have characters that were emotionally resonant, that they were victims of this, just the same way that John was a victim, which I think is really becomes clear, especially when you start seeing Amanda's relationship with the other drug addict, and she kind of sees herself in it. But look, Mexico is this beautiful, vibrant. It's complex. It's not easy to their traditions, their history, their communities. It's not a caricature. It's as long as you approach the story and lean into characters, that's what's, I think, most important.
I'm glad you said that. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to add, the original script was written to take place in Eastern Europe and be shot there, right? And
I totally forgot that, Kevin. That's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I've shot in Bulgaria, and it was fine, but I didn't really connect to the setting that much in the script. I mean, I didn't even think about it like as this would be better if it was somewhere else. But then one of our producers was told that it would be cheaper to shoot in Mexico, and that the time zone would be the same as LA, and it just takes less time to fly there. So he called me a couple months before we started shooting and said, kind of tentatively, like, would you be okay if we shot in Mexico instead? And I was like, yes, do it. And I feel like in the first 45 seconds of that call, a whole bunch of the mood and look of the movie kind of rolled out for me. And even that idea of using a tourist Aztec landmark as our way to show how Jigsaw finds his way back to the cab driver, Diego. It all made total sense to me. And, I've always been fascinated by Mexico, and I love the story of the Aztecs and the insanity of what happened when the Europeans came in. And so to me, it made it all come together. And I really liked when we had Diego giving John Kramer Jigsaw a cab ride past this Aztec sacrificial site and saying like, oh yeah, they used to cut the hearts out of people and roll them down the hill. You can tell that it's something that he probably says to every tourist that he gives a ride from the
But it resonates with Jigsaw in a special way.
Yes, exactly. And so, and then what Josh says about the people of Mexico, I have the feeling that when, we were told that it was going to be, or what we felt about being in Mexico, they might maybe imagined a more sort of cliched or traditional version of studying the movie in Mexico, where we're focusing on gangsters and cartels and all that. But instead, I really wanted to go the complete opposite direction and show Diego as this very kind of happy-go-lucky cab driver, showing him all the beauty of Mexico City. The music is, is very upbeat, and the hacienda where most of the story takes place is very beautiful. And I was proud to do it that way. We at least present our Mexican characters as good at the beginning, the professional healthcare people. And so it's only later that we find out that they're lowlives, but still you've established that these are, good people.
And what I would observe about that is that if you're in a saw trap, you're probably a lowlife. That has less to do with, than with the fact that these are saw trap victims. But anyway, I just want to move on to the next question.
Okay.
I recently interviewed President Trump's NIH director, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya. He said something to me that sounded a lot like what Dr. Cecilia Peterson says in the movie. And I'm not saying this to imply that Bhattacharya is disingenuous. I'm saying it to observe that these are the arguments that people find compelling, especially people who voted for President Trump. And I'm reading the quote now, and after I'm done, I want your reaction to it, whether you agree or disagree with it, especially in the context of the film. If you just echo what everyone else believes, it may advance your scientific career, but that points to a problem in the culture of science. We ought to value truth, right? If we can have a culture of truth, then we're not trying to destroy a scientist simply for the fact that they don't agree with the consensus. We shouldn't be destroying a scientist simply for being wrong. The quote goes on, but I'm going to stop there. As you observe yourself, that does seem to be the ethos of both Jigsaw and Dr. Peterson. How do you feel this reflects on American politics and culture today, more broadly?
Go ahead if you want.
No, go ahead, Kevin. You go first. Or Pete, you go first. I do want to hear.
Well, one thing I would say, I have two things to say. One thing I would say is I agree with that statement wholeheartedly. I wish he would read that to the president and have him believe it wholeheartedly. But I think that's right. I mean, he's right about that. No?
I find it very disingenuous.
No, of course. But I mean, the statement, this is what they do. They state the way it should be, and then they don't do it. And then they point to the words they said and say, what are you talking about? That's just what I said,
But what we're seeing right now in the Trump administration is in the NIH and the Weather Service. It's not the vilification of a few outliers who have these minority views, because almost every real medical professional thinks vaccines are, fantastic. 95% or more of climate scientists think that climate change is real and probably caused by humans. So what they're saying is the exact opposite. They're saying fire all those people and then put the fringe in power, the vaccine skeptics like Robert Kennedy Jr. And so what he's really saying is that is the opposite. They've elevated these quacks, and it's totally hypocritical. That's not a culture of truth.
They're almost taking the rhetoric and using it as a shield against scrutiny. They're saying what we think is the right thing, but it's really just in order to protect against us actually digging deep.
Yeah. Did you read Bhattacharya's op-ed in Washington Post yesterday?
No.
It's so he's defending RFK Jr. and Trump's decision to end messenger RNA vaccine research, and it's not because it's medically wrong. He says this. He says that it was developed under Trump and it saved millions of lives and it was really great, but because Biden mandated that Americans get this vaccine. He made them trust the whole process. So now they of mRNA vaccine research. So now they have to throw it all out and find some other way to create vaccines until Trump can figure out how to win back the trust for, the vaccine that they developed before. It's insanity. It's insanity.
I'm glad you made that point, because what I think is so compelling about Saw X is that the dynamic of, on the surface, this sounds reasonable, but if you dig a little deeper, it's more sinister, applies both to what we're experiencing in reality and the premise of Saw X. And I do not think that's a coincidence. I think it's because there is legitimacy to our skepticism toward the healthcare establishment. Kevin, you and I have talked at length about how Saw 6, which was released in 2009 during the height of the Obamacare debate, very effectively captures a lot of those legitimate critiques. And so when people are skeptical of doctors who bill them too much and may prescribe medication they don't need because it puts money in their pockets, that is valid. The problem is, just because this is the disease doesn't mean quackery is the cure. And I feel like that's the dynamic that this movie captures. It was released in 2023. The two of you must have written it in the early 20s, and you would have worked on the plot around the same time. How much did you consciously intend to inject those themes, especially about the inequality in American healthcare that makes people prone to falling for this?
I mean, look, I'll start, and Pete, you can add to it. I don't think we set out. You never set out with just your theme. You don't say, all right, the theme of this is going to be this. Let's try to work a plot around it. What was important to us was to write. When we approached it originally, it was about writing a great John Kramer story. When we went to the studio, we had gotten burnt on Jigsaw because John Kramer was only in the movie for 10 minutes and the audience felt disappointed. We were burnt by Spiral because John Kramer wasn't in the movie at all. And Pete and I were just like, there hasn't been since maybe Saw 2, and even not even Saw 2, because there was so much in the gameplay, there hasn't been a John Kramer story. Pete and I were excited to do a deep dive into John Kramer and work with Tobin and just create this. And the themes came to it slightly afterward when we started playing. And look, just like, there's a little bit of a thematic element to Spiral with police brutality. That was one of the first things we came to. Pete and I were having massive conversations that we didn't want to get too close to Saw 6. Was that Saw 6 or Saw 4? The healthcare Saw 6. Yeah. We were purposely we were a little bit worried, but once we stumbled upon this idea that Cecilia Peterson frames herself as John Kramer, she frames herself as someone outside the system. She's questioning the establishment for the greater good, or so she says she is. And that John Kramer couldn't have gotten a better, beautiful worm on that hook to get duped, because that's who he is. That's everything that he does. So once we realized that, once we discovered that Cecilia was just a flip side of John Kramer, that's where this thematic element all came into play.
I would add two things. One is Saw 6, which we had nothing to do with, is probably my favorite, like, watching people get theirs story of all. I really, it's not, I'm not saying it's my favorite movie, but I credit to Josh. Josh was the one who picked up on a single line in that movie, which is where he says the healthcare, that we can't do anything for you, John. And he says there's some experimental work being done in Sweden. That's from that movie. And then Josh took that and said, we could build a whole movie out of that, which was really smart, and we did. And the one thing I wanted to circle back to was a question that was asked sooner that I just think people would find interesting. But in all 10 Saw movies, this is the only movie where John Kramer is wrong about anything. And this is a big internal debate. The idea that John, and it was Orrin pointed it out, and it was a really Orrin Cool's. It was a really good point, which is would John Kramer fall for something like this? And so, sort of the whole purpose of your initial question is that was our argument, was this is the one thing, the healthcare system. And when a person is that desperate, that combined with the current state of the healthcare, yes, the answer is we could forgive him this one time when he got it wrong. So that's how strong we felt the producers felt the idea of someone being duped by this thing due to the current state of the healthcare system in America, could work.
I agree, and that's why I think her scam it kind of just works so well in this context. She sells herself as this compassionate alternative to the cold, hard-blooded profit machines of the medical, the healthcare system. And John, because of who he is primed. He is primed to believe and just buy it hook, line, and sinker, which it really creates a really nice dynamic between those two. Where you're always looking for who's your big bad, and how do we make them so perfect that our lead character will almost get killed from it. Like, that's, whether it's Die Hard or whatever the movie is. And Cecilia, through a lot of rewriting and through great notes from Lionsgate and Kevin and Twisted Pictures and all of that, we realized that this was the perfect kind of, they're so similar and yet completely different.
At one point, Cecilia says, "I don't have a silly moral code like you." That is the key difference. Neither of them are good people, but one of them is a better person. Which is the difference between the Democratic and Republican parties, by the way. Neither of them are good people, but one of them is clearly better.
Yeah.
But that I just want to say that matters, because we're just getting so. When we give in, there's this. Sorry, this is off topic, but this idea that the Democrats are fighting internally about as to whether or not Gavin Newsom wants to take more seats in California, and the thinking is once we start rolling around and playing by their rules, we're no different, or is it time to fight back? Like, that's sort of the internal debate that's going on right now, I think, and it's really interesting to watch. And one thing I just want to add that we're talking about, and I think we should clarify since it doesn't happen enough, is, there's a big distinction between the healthcare system and the work that the medical community and the science community is doing to come up with cures and come up with procedures. Those are two different things. And I think Trump has successfully managed to tar them all as one. And that's to the great detriment of this country, I think,
I want to add, I agree with you. I would say, and I'm curious if you would agree with me, summarizing your point in a somewhat different way, there's a difference between the intellectuals who are scholars trying to improve humanity for both their own curiosity and out of altruistic reasons, and there are the professionals like the nurses, like the EMTs, like the doctors who are in hospitals every day treating patients. I am not disparaging any of them. I don't think any of us are. What we're disparaging are the people who make you pay out of the nose when you're dying. What we're disparaging are the people who prescribe medications you don't need because it'll line their pockets. And when I say
the people who understand that a cure is the worst thing that can happen to their bottom line,
Yes.
They don't want a cure. They want to manage,
Yeah,
exactly. And those are the valid criticisms that, and again, I would add, because you said that there was a great internal debate over whether Jigsaw should be scammed. I would argue the reason it's okay is because millions of other people get scammed in the exact same way, including, I would argue, the people who fall for the Trump line when it comes to science and health policy. I don't think that those Trump voters want the greedy businessmen to win. In fact, many of them share our criticisms of the healthcare system. They're just following a bad solution. That's how I look at it. What do you guys think?
Well, I know that there's still talk about Luigi, the guy.
I was just about to bring him up.
But there's also I read recently, I don't know, maybe in the Atlantic, about a movement to make a hero out of Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, and that it crosses the complete political spectrum of the United States, the kinds of people that think that his sort of Luddite attempt to end technology before it ends us is an increasingly widespread sentiment. So that's he's Kaczynski, sort of a Jigsaw type, if you think about it.
Oh yes, definitely. I do want to pivot a little to a different line of questions that I had. This one involving the issue of drug abuse and addiction more broadly. One of the things I liked about this movie is the focus on the relationship between John Kramer and Amanda Young, which is in Saw 2 and Saw 3 to an extent, but I feel like Saw 2 is the beginning of that story and Saw 3 is the end. I would like to imagine Saw X should be watched between those two. And it is in large part because of that relationship. To what extent is this a commentary on how, even within Jigsaw's own philosophical movement, there is dissent about how much personal accountability trap victims may have for their offenses, such as when Amanda sympathizes with Gabriella because Gabriella, like Amanda, is there because of addiction issues?
Look, I mean, and this idea, I will admit, came from many discussions. This was not an original idea that Pete and I had in the script from the start, at least. But once we started kind of playing around and realizing that there was an opportunity here, you want to give your characters something new to explore. For John, it's about coming to terms with is he really doing this, to make others happy, or is he doing revenge now for the first time? And one of the things that we really wanted to explore with Saw X is that even within Jigsaw's kind of moral universe, which is very, very rigid, there's room for disagreement between him and Amanda. John has this almost kind of mechanical worldview, if you can think of it that way. People either value their lives enough to live or don't value their lives and they're going to die. But Amanda has this empathy toward this drug addicted woman because she sees herself in Gabriella. And what I think is nice about that relationship is that it shows that, that morality, the morality that we have isn't always, black or white. It's not binary. Even within this very specific idea, John's philosophy, even within John's philosophy, John and Amanda are coming at things from a very, very different place.
Yeah, and for me personally, it's been the nature of the Saw story as a whole that even though we've made 10 films, we truly never had any idea while we were making any given film what the next chapter was going to be, right? Even though the storylines all kind of pretzel together throughout all 10, it was never planned. It was always hard enough just to make a film within a year of the last one. And so it could have been that there would be contradictions within the characters. And in a way, there kind of is, maybe. So like the first time we ever hear Jigsaw speak is in Saw 1 when he's got a gun held on him by Detective Tapp. And he goes into this super angry monologue about, I'm sick of people who don't appreciate their blessings. And it culminates him saying, I'm sick of it all. And he slashes Danny Glover's throat. And it's this vicious reptile version of Jigsaw that, we all loved, and it was fantastic. And then you flash forward to Saw X. It's 10 movies later, but it takes place pretty soon after Saw 1. It's between Saw 1 and 2. And he's a guy who quotes Robert Browning while he watches sunset, and he takes a little boy, under his wing, and then sacrifices himself, to avoid the kid getting killed through bloodboarding. But the beauty of Tobin Bell's performance is that it still feels unified somehow. He's
a complicated man.
He's a chameleon. But it
Are you talking about Tobin Bell or John Kramer when you say he's a complicated man?
Both.
I think John Kramer works because Tobin Bell has such incredible presence, and he knows how to occupy the character and make it feel consistent, even when it really isn't.
I think it works because in the series Seinfeld, Tobin Bell actually confronted Kramer. He has to be aware of that.
I love that meme. I love that meme so much. Yeah.
Kramer versus Kramer.
Yeah. and I think that's part of the success of the movie series is that that Shawnee's character, Amanda, and Tobin's character do have these nuances. And Shawnee can be very compassionate, and then with Gabriella, but then within minutes she's clearly taking pleasure in causing pain to Cecilia Parker and that sort of thing. So she's all over the map, and that's why we love her, because you don't know what to expect next.
And it is also consistent with what you saw of her character in previous installments. So I agree that it always feels like the same character, even when they do things that seem inconsistent, because humans are inconsistent. We're not computers that constantly follow a programming consistently.
Yeah, and we're building that. I mean, again, when Pete and I sat down to start talking about this, if we set the movie in this place, it was definitely, we needed to figure out what the thing between Amanda and John were that we're going to separate them, because they're gonna come apart and the audience knows this already. And for us, going back to the way that they look at these people that they're torturing, John wouldn't say torturing, he'd say saving, but when she looks at Gabriella, who's addicted to drugs, she doesn't just see someone who made bad choices in the same way that John does. She sees someone who has been failed by society, by healthcare, because that was her. That was who she was. That's so we're able to kind of come at it with a slightly different sense. I don't know. There's something that I really love about them both being on the same team, but doing it for different reasons.
I think that speaks to the core philosophical concept in the franchise. One of the things I love about Saw as a series is that, unlike, for instance, Halloween or A Nightmare on Elm Street or Friday the 13th, which are all great, they're not based around an idea. They're based around a killer. The Saw series is based around an idea, putting people in traps and seeing how far you would go to survive. But the question then becomes, who deserves to be in that trap? And I feel like that's where there's tension.
Well, okay, it's sort of a running joke among Saw fans that Jigsaw will submit you to his methods for infractions like smoking, or in Saw 6, for real, and in Saw 4, the cop who neglects his family because he wants to save people too much. It's like, okay, I feel like we don't have any of that in Saw 10. Like, it's very upfront for the audience why these people are getting tortured, but for sure there have been times in the past where it's like, we need an excuse for a trap, let's just have it be blah.
This guy jaywalked. Now you're in a trap where they're all coming at you and you can't dodge. You're the frogger. You're the frog in the frog.
Yeah.
That should be his jaywalking trap. But no, here's the point that I make, is that Jigsaw and Amanda Young and Mark Hoffman are not heroes. They're anti-heroes. They are not good people. They are people who do bad things, but what makes them compelling is they have redeeming qualities. Would you agree with that analysis?
Sure. Especially
they're Democrats. They're like Democrats.
No, John Kramer's a libertarian. Registered libertarian.
John Kramer would have voted for Gary Johnson. But he would have been angry because he would have known where Aleppo was. So I also want to talk about let me go back through my list of questions. I think we may have actually covered all of my questions already. I do have my last question, which I always close interviews with, which is, I'm going to wait until the end. Hold on one moment. Shane, we can edit me looking through my questions out, I hope.
See if we can find a way to edit my face so it doesn't look like it's melting. That would be great.
Listen, Christy Nome has the same problem, and she has way more money than any of us.
Oh,
Uh, but okay, actually, I do have this question. The final trap in Saw X, and maybe I'm reading too much into this, but it strikes me as a bit of a metaphor for economic and social and racial inequality. And here's why. And I'm spoiling this for people who haven't seen the movie, but basically it was a trap designed for a bunch of middle-class white people, but some poor young Hispanic boy who wanders by and has absolutely nothing to do with any of this bullshit gets roped into it. And even the libertarian is like, this is too far. And then there are the white people who are like, I don't care, I'll make more money. Are you telling me there isn't, to a degree, an allegory here for modern America and Mexico and the world?
Well, it was written for Eastern Europe.
Yep. Let's just go with, yeah, sure. We talked about that. That was exactly the whole plan. That's how it all came together, just like you said.
I know I'm reading into it. There are some times when you're a film nerd, and I'm sure we're all film nerds, when you're like, I'm definitely reading into this. There is no way that's what they intended, but it'd be kind of brilliant.
I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can cop to knowing that in advance. I love your read, though. I think that's great for us. Coming up with the idea of Jorge. Was that his real name or his character name? I forget.
His character is Carlos.
Carlos. Putting Carlos in that trap for us was about amping up the tension. After 10 Saw films, it's always been their policy never to put a kid in danger. And we realized that if we did put a kid in danger, it would really amp up the stakes and create a huge moral dilemma for John. And also, one of the nice things about the bloodboarding sequence is that we know, the audience knows, we know as writers and directors that the audience knows that John is going to live through this. John's going to live. So then the real torment for the audience is, if John lives, that means the boy's going to die. So, and then we had to figure out, all right, well, how do we make it all tidy up and work in the end, which you brought up earlier about the big twist there. But yeah.
All right, I'm actually going to ask a question about a different Saw movie because I have you all here, and I may as well because I might not get another chance.
Does it require us to remember it?
Spiral.
Yeah.
Spiral is like
I remember that one.
Is like Defund the Police, the movie. There is you said that when you wrote the ending for Saw X, you didn't imagine the political subtext. I will not believe that if you tell me that you didn't know the political subtext in Spiral. It's a pretty overt political subtext, in my opinion. How did you get away with that?
By not leaning into it too hard, look, I think a lot of Saw fans are very pro-police. I mean, like, a lot of the hardcore horror nerds that I meet online do not share my political sensibilities at all. But we share a love of horror, which is great. So, but yeah, that was definitely part of it. I don't know, Pete. I mean, it's about they're not punishing cops in general.
I don't know. I'll tell you. I mean, it's a really good. That is a good question, and I can't say. My issue with the police has always been that this is a little bit what you get when you hire policemen, and I know that's a horrible thing to say, but that's an element that just comes in. And, you put yourself in this position where for the police, this determination they have to stick together at all costs is really, for me, the biggest problem with the police. Like, if they could just get past the idea that one bad cop being taken down or or just they themselves exposing bad cops rather than waiting for them to be exposed and then defending them, like, it is a really, effed up. It's an effed up system. The system's really effed up. And frankly, I don't know if I'd like to see money allocated to other things, in our criminal system. But to me, I don't know how to fix that. Like, I don't know. I'm sorry, I know that this isn't really what you're getting at, but there's such a brotherhood of I mean, think about the people that you knew that grew up to be cops. I bet some of them turned out to be really good cops. I'm not saying that they weren't, but it takes a certain kind of loyalty. They were always very like loyalty oriented, and it just breeds that kind of corruptness that I wish there was an answer for. Anyway, that's my
I would
long-winded answer.
argue for like my brother-in-law is a police officer. Two people I grew up with in high school who I'm very close to became police officers. They're all good men. I agree with you, Pete, that the biggest problem is that the good men and the bad men seem to all be lumped in together. My argument is that a lot of that has to do with the police unions. And I'm very pro-union. I'm not bashing labor unions in terms of them getting high wages and benefits and autonomy for their workers, but I don't think a union should be allowed to get its workers away with murder. Like, I do think that should be a line. I'm pro-union, but I don't think your union should be able to cover it up if you commit a murder. That to me symbolizes.
Yes, exactly.
Like, that's really it.
I mean, Spiral's a pretty cynical movie because the only cop in the entire department who's not filthy with corruption is Chris Rock's character, and he still like stabs a guy in the leg and pours tequila on the wound to get him to fess up. Yeah. So
he's one of the good ones.
Somebody's got issues with cops,
but he doesn't win in the end. He too doesn't win in the end. He's taken down, and perhaps it's because of his own corruption.
Well, one thing that I would say, as far as like people who become cops, I have one childhood friend who became a cop, and I was out of touch with him for many decades, but he's a stand-up guy. I went to a wedding this last weekend of somebody who's a cop, and I think I had certain expectations of what the ceremony would be like and the people there, and I was completely wrong, and it was wonderful and fantastic and flawless. And to that, I would say, for as horrible as it is to live through this current era in American history, it has opened my eyes to things that I was blind to prior to Trump. And one of the most interesting ones is just the way I was emotionally caught up in what was happening to, for example, the FBI at the beginning of Trump's second term, where basically the good people were thrown out and punished, and their lives must be totally miserable. And I think most of them probably were. Like, I have the feeling that the more moral and good that you have been through your life, the more likely it is that the Republicans have now slumped on your face and kicked you out, right? So I never saw that coming in my life, that I would like want to cry on behalf of the FBI, but here we are. That's how fucked up our time is.
I think what I would say, and I'm curious if you will agree, and this applies, I'm going to actually bring all of these themes full circle. You can oppose bad people in the medical establishment without being anti-medicine. You can oppose bad police officers without being anti-cop. You can oppose the corruption in the FBI, which is rampant, without saying, okay, we should get rid of it altogether. It is possible to take those middle ground approaches. And weirdly, I feel like that's why Jigsaw is so compelling a character, because he does have nuance. Kevin, I agree with you. He's a libertarian, but he's also one of the smarter libertarians out there, in that he's not a dunce. He does have self-awareness. He has the ability to admit when he's wrong. Like, he does have a certain degree of depth to him. And I guess this brings me to my closing question, which I ask at the end of all my interviews, and I hope each of you can try to answer it at some point. Is there anything else you'd like to say about the political and social subtext of Saw X that I haven't broached so far with the questions I've already asked?
Well, no, I think you've done a really good. You hit everything. The one thing I would say, though, that I really do like about the franchise, and I loved about it even before I started working on it, is, and I think about it in my own life, is just this idea that I'm responsible for my own life, and I need to make the right choices to be a good person, and I fail all the time, but I do think there is something to people losing their appreciation for what. One social topic to talk about is, being a white male. I was born a white male, and I never understood the privilege that came with that. That's the one I have to say. Josh knows this. I have a lot of pushback about some of the hardcore terminology and phraseology of things that we say. And you know, as a Democrat and as a liberal, but I mean that's how I view myself. But I don't know where I was going with that. But just basically, you know, taking responsibility for your own life is just something that I think, you know, we forget to do. And that oh yeah, sorry, as a white male, I didn't realize. I'm really grateful to all the progress that's been made in the last few years to help me realize that, you know, is for me to sit here and not do more is something that I think is something that is inherently in. So I don't know if that made any sense. I kind of got lost in the middle of it, but
No, I mean, I get that. I would say though that, you know, one of the other things for me about the story is, yes, these people that we're putting through torturous trials, they good and bad is it's sometimes it's hard to really label somebody as good or bad. It's not, you know, it's not the way it usually is in the movies. And for me, at least, you can't tell a story about like this dying guy being exploited by the healthcare scam without touching on that, the inequality that, you know, that the world, the way that the world treats our most vulnerable. You know, one of the things that the Saw franchise has always done is it doesn't punch down. It, you know, the John's targets, they're not random. They're predators. They're profiteers. They're people who have, you know, have taken advantage of the system. But at the same time, just like you look at all those characters in Saw X, they're all being, the reason they made their choices are because of the inequalities around them. It's not always just pick yourself up by your bootstraps. A lot of times it's impossible because the world is against you. The world is not the world. People are not against you. It's our leaders that would rather make a buck than actually truly help people.
Well put. And Kevin?
I mean, I don't necessarily have anything more that I've been yearning to get out. I know that's a weak way to.
I always admire when someone just says that, though.
Okay, Kevin's defense, I've been like pouring over him for details about Saw for like years. I probably have wrung you out like a sponge for information.
Well, so you did talk about Saw as being a franchise that is somewhat different because it's about something, and you also mentioned that it seems like it would have been a challenge to try and make a film with you know, a message movie out of something like Spiral, where it is the anti-police story, or at least the one that's criticizing police corruption. And you do have to kind of be subtle when you're pitching an idea like that and making it, because there's a pretty strong sentiment, and it gets worse every year, I think, and has for a long time, maybe since the 70s, against making message movies, you know, at least if you're trying to appeal to a mainstream audience. That feels very dangerous to a lot of producers and studios. And I don't know if people were necessarily paying a whole lot of attention to the idea that Saw 6 was going to be about healthcare, because it wasn't quite the loaded subject that it became by the time the movie came out. And there definitely were some fans that they heard it was about healthcare and they're like, it's a pro-Obama movie, we're not going to go see that. And you know, to me, it's kind of silly for studios to worry too much about that, you know, having a message, because people actually do want to feel like they spent their time watching something worthwhile. You know, I will try to slide things like that in by calling it a theme of the movie, and frankly just not talking about what this movie means at all to the people that are making the financial decisions, unless you know that they're the type that might be receptive to that sort of thing. But you know, that's part of this particular form of art, is that you have to be a little bit sneaky, but when you get away with it, it really pays off.
All right. Well, on that note, I did receive a message that we have to wrap up. I'm sorry to cut you off, but I just got pinged that I have 1 minute left. So
Okay.
thank you all for taking the time to speak with me.
So much fun. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks,
You
Matt.
guys are mensches. I'm very grateful. Thank you. Thank you so
All right.
much.